You are listening to episode 33 of the Lewis and Kyle Show with Jacob McMillen.
The number one reason people fail is because they don't embrace that they're their own sales department. That's the number one thing. Like literally every single business is two parts, sales and fulfillment. When you're a writer, if you're a decent writer, the fulfillment comes pretty easy, but you still have to hit that sales one.
Hello and welcome to the Lewis and Kyle Show, an interview podcast where Lewis and I share tools for success in entrepreneurship, investing, self-education, and fitness through interviews with inspiring mentors.
In this episode, we talk to Jacob McMillen. Jacob McMillen is a freelance copywriter who creates educational content, online courses, and a community related to succeeding as a freelance copywriter in different industries and at different skill levels, beginner, intermediate, and advanced. He has a podcast where he shares 10-minute clips about how to become a better copywriter, and he also maintains a community of some of the best copywriters on the internet. We brought him on to discuss his journey going from $0 to $15,000 a month as a copywriter, as a freelancer, and we get into some tips on should you learn copywriting? If so, how? And what makes a good copywriter? What makes a bad copywriter? Fun conversation, really educational, very high impact, and I hope you all enjoy it. Well, guys, we got Jacob here with us. Super excited to chat with him about copywriting and his freelancing career and some of the insights he has about those things. Jacob, thanks so much for coming on with us.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. Always fun to chat about, writing, freelancing, online business. It's fun stuff.
Yeah, so I got lost in the internet again, as I do, searching for brilliant keywords like how to make money online, how to make money writing, as if this podcast hasn't given me enough ideas to actually think about. But I was on one of those searches again, reminded me of the idea of freelance copywriting. So I searched for one of those things, how to make money, freelance copywriting, copywriter, and all of them were starting to bring me back to your site. So I figured you had to know what you're talking about if you had that kind of authority. So got really into your content and wanted to speak with you. So it's exciting for us. Real quick for the listeners, a lot of people, even in business, don't necessarily know what you're talking about when you talk about copywriting in the sense of writing. Could you define it for us?
Yeah, so copywriting is really just writing kind of with a sales focus. It's writing intended to drive action, writing intended to introduce someone, to a company or a specific offer, that's trying to sell something at some point. So I kind of, the phraseology I use when someone hasn't heard of copywriting is just sales writing, really that simple.
So what are some things you'd write as like a copywriter? I know you break it down on your website into 3 main categories for freelancers. Yeah,
the bulk of what I do is going to be website copy. So, anytime you go to a website, the wording that you're reading there that's introducing you to the brand, introducing you to the offer, the mission statement, the individual products or services, that's all copywriting. Email copywriting is another big one. Anytime you get an email from a brand or individual you follow, the writing you're reading falls under that copywriting umbrella. And then the other big one, this one's a little bit different because it tends to be a little bit more indirect. But blog writing is a form of copywriting that's kind of more specifically referred to as, content or content writing. But it kind of falls under that umbrella that ultimately when brands create these blog posts, they're ultimately trying to get someone to engage with their brand, in some way, shape, or form.
So how did you get into copywriting? How did you fall into this world that you're now so entrenched in?
Yeah, so I actually paid my way through college doing direct sales, and I kind of hated sales. I was really good at it, but I hated it. It was like I hated the process of getting in a conversation with someone where, how I felt about them at the end of the conversation was based on whether or not they purchased. It's just kind of, and I couldn't really hack my emotions to not feel that way. So it's just kind of an emotionally debilitating process to go through direct sales, but I was good at it. It served its purpose, but then after college, I was like, I'm not doing that. And I'd started exploring, the online business world, particularly SEO. And through that, I started to kind of, I found out what, someone came to me and asked for copywriting, and I was like, I don't even know what that is. So they explained it, and I kind of started to look into it, and I was like, this is like everything I loved about sales minus everything I hated about sales. And at that point, I kind of knew pretty quickly that this is what I wanted to do long term. So
it's a little bit more scalable too, right? Like with direct sales, you have to be in front of the person selling to them directly, but with copywriting, you can just put it out there in the world and it'll sell for you 24/7.
Yep, exactly. It's a very, high reward to investment ratio relative to, other things that you can do for sure.
So can you tell us a bit about, how you got, what was like becoming successful at it? So you kind of identified it's something you wanted to do, but how do you actually begin to support yourself doing it?
Yeah. So, at first I was just kind of exploring what it was and kind of getting to develop persuasive writing skills. Because really all copywriting is it's persuasive writing structured in specific ways. So, just learning, how to generally improve my persuasive writing, and then more specifically, how to get good at specific types of copywriting. I just, from, one project I'm working on, I just went through and wrote video scripts for the first time. And so, I'm pulling on 8 years of copywriting experience, but I'm not pulling on that, when you're kind of attacking a new structure, it's a little bit of a different skill set. So you kind of have to, you have to learn the basics and then learn the specific structures that you're going to work in. So for me, it kind of started with more just the website copywriting and the blog writing. And so I just, practicing those, a little bit of reading about stuff, but then just, actually practicing it. And then what I did is I kind of stumbled across the demand for it, which is how I became aware that this was something people were offering. So I just followed the trail of demand. I just kept looking for people who were trying to hire out for this stuff. And I used paid gigs to go practice it. Whereas, a lot of people today, when they first get in, they think they need to go through this extensive process of getting really good at it before they can go hire it out. But that's just not the reality, because, even people who are hiring copywriting today, it's on a spectrum. There's people hiring $50 budget all the way up to a $50,000 budget. So, those $50, $100, $200 budgets, they're asking for people who are wanting to practice their writing, because no one who can charge $5,000 is going to take that project. They still need a writer. So that's kind of, just kind of followed the demand and would try to sell myself, and then, work my ass off to do as good a job as I could and get better along the way.
That's a really cool progression. I didn't think about that. It makes a lot of sense where, a lot of books preach that idea, but don't give any practical idea of how you would actually do that, where say, it's a good idea to get paid to learn, but you can kind of graduate from lower paying gigs up until the actual kind of gigs that can sustain yourself if you follow that route. I think you use the terminology in like one of your ebooks. If anyone's willing to flash a $20 bill at you and you're just getting started, just go for it.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
I really like that messaging.
Yeah, you really don't want to be rate chasing in your early years. You want to be focusing on what's going to maximize my skills development. Because if you can get a lot more practice in and a lot more real experience under your belt, that pays back to you tenfold over, any dollar amount that you're going to make in your first year or two.
So when you're pitching someone, are you just using your conversion numbers from previous jobs in order to prove to somebody, what metric are you using to know that you're getting better while practicing?
So that's actually a really good question that's virtually unanswerable when it comes to copywriting, partially because it's a subjective skill, but also because very few of the clients you're going to work with are actually testing at a statistically significant level, if at all. So for example, you could write a piece of copy for a specific audience, show it to me, show it to the most famous, successful copywriter you've ever heard of, ask for our opinions. And at the end of the day, it's just going to be an educated guess until you actually put it in front of the audience and test it at a high enough, level to really be able to get a good conversion statistic on it. You don't really know how good that copy is. And the reality is that a lot of the projects that I've worked on, that many copywriters work on, don't ever actually get put in front of a large sample size audience. If we're talking about, me writing copy for a consulting firm, I wrote one for a B2B consulting firm that's focused on organizational health. What's their website being used as part of? They're making an initial in-person contact with someone, then directing them over to their site. And the site's more of just a supplemental, continuing the conversation that they've had in person. Ultimately, how well the site performs is going to have more to do with their in-person conversation than the copy I wrote. My copy is designed more just to enhance this in-person sales process that they have. And there's really no way to evaluate from a purely objective level how well it's performing. So what it ends up coming down to is, do they like it? does the client like it? Do they feel like it's doing a good job of saying what they want to say? And that's why it's so accessible to get into this field, is because a lot of these projects you're working on, that's really the only metric, is does the client like it? Are you able to do a better job than the client themselves could of communicating this offer? And most people are just not comfortable translating their thoughts into succinct words, succinct written words. So if you can sit down with a business owner for 30 minutes, listen to them like passionately talk about their business, and then like translate that into written words, you can be a copywriter who's delivering very tangible value to these businesses. And that's not, that's something that, maybe takes a little bit of practice, but it's not a significantly difficult skill set to kind of get into initially. If you're just comfortable taking thoughts and turning them into written words, you have a pretty strong foundation to go off of from the very get-go.
Well, that's super interesting. And I know you're framing that in terms of, if you're thinking about getting into this, a lot of people have been thinking about getting into this, and you kind of have been projecting in some of your podcast episodes that you think that's only going to continue because people are getting displaced from work. A lot of people say, well, I know how to write, maybe I can get into writing. And your response is that the demand for copywriters is literally endless. How do you justify something like that?
Yeah. So for starters, when we talk about online sales, nearly every online sale has copywriting included at some point in that sale taking place. Virtually every single one. So when we talk about e-commerce sales, 2010, 170 billion. 2020, we're projected to hit 1.2 trillion. That's 600% growth in 10 years. So when you talk about a market that's exploded that much, the supply of writers isn't even close to keeping up with that 600%, demand explosion. So it's a very simple economics model right now of, the demand being drastically higher than the supply. And that's why I have students literally hopping in. I got an email from a student the other week who they were doing their homework for the third assignment in my course. And by doing the homework, which actually involves them going out and doing real business growth stuff, they landed a $14,000 gig for their very first client. It's just stupid right now. It's literally, the demand is so high and the supply is so low relative to that it's like, in some ways, it's just like free money. And it's kind of like, I kind of equate it to back in the California gold rush. Who actually made the most money from that? It wasn't the prospectors. It was the people selling the shovels and the supplies. You want to be the one selling shovels in a gold rush. And that is literally what copywriting is. Out of all the business models you can look at, you got Amazon FBA, you got, drop shipping, you got affiliate marketing, you got all these things, advertising, all these different really effective ways to make money online, but they all work through copywriting. Literally none of them are functional without some level of copywriting. So copywriting isn't necessarily the only or the most lucrative thing you can do, but it's the most reliable by far, because anyone making money online is needing copywriting to power that. It's the shovel powering that dig. So that's why I make that claim of it being bottomless demand and really accessible, really reliable, because it's just it's a very high reward, low risk business model.
So let me ask you, how does it make you feel when you when you land a client that is bringing you 14 grand versus when one of your students comes to you and says, hey, I can't, this is changing my life. What's the difference in the way that you think about that?
Yeah. So, I've been doing this for 8 years now. So when I land a client, at this point, it's not really a surprise. I did a case study last April off of a Twitter challenge where I sent out 10 pitches and had a $5,000 paycheck in my account in 48 hours, on a dare, so just going out and generating income is pretty run of the mill for me at this stage. With my students, I just put my course out back in March. So it's still a new experience for me when I get these emails from students who are, crushing it and changing their lives. And it's especially, so I would say at this point, it's a lot more satisfying. I just also, based on my personality type, I don't know if you're familiar with the Enneagram at all, but I'm an Enneagram 8, which is it's called the challenger. So I like challenging people to go after what they want in life. And when I see them do that and then reap the rewards of that, it's hugely satisfying. It's a big part of why I scaled down some of my freelance work to create my course and do this side of the business in the first place. So yeah, I mean, it's definitely a huge emotional high to get those emails from people, especially when, I have the core side, but then I have the right mind side too, where I'm more, that's my premium membership for intermediate and advanced writers. And I'm interacting with those people on a day-to-day basis. So I'm like right in the trenches with them on the challenges they're facing. So when they come back to me and they're like, hey, I just got paid $1,000 to write for this website that you told me to pitch, it's just like, it's just super exciting,
Can you walk us back on that journey? So like you said, you'd kind of gotten pretty good at this. You could off a dare land clients overnight if you needed to. And you kind of, speaking of challenges, said you framed it for yourself as a challenge where could you spend 12 months and create the best copywriting training anywhere? What was the inspiration for framing it in such a unique way, and how's that been going? Because are you still have that 12 months have passed, or and now you're in the evaluation phase of that project?
July was the 12th month, so August is the 13th month, and it was a pretty big success. So I'm continuing forward with that for sure. For me, it was a situation where I had helped a client over the previous year rank across the board for all things consulting. So consulting, consultant, how to become a consultant, how to build a consulting business, like anything with that, I had them ranking in like the top 3 results. And I was like, shoot, like if I could get them there in a year, I could totally do this for me for copywriting. So I need to I need to finally do that. And something that had kind of been on the back burner, I think most people these days, from the beginning of them getting into this online field, the idea of selling info products is one of the more appealing options they want to work toward at some point. And I was no exception to that. I've been aware of that for a while. But for me, I was very much waiting until I had a really clear plan of how I could offer something better than what was currently in the space. Because I didn't just want to, offer some other thing that's not solving any unique problems. At the end of the day, if someone else was doing it better than I could do it, I'd rather affiliate for them than, try to make something not as good. So I'd been experimenting on the side. I tried at one point doing direct like one-to-one mentoring with several different writers to see how that worked. I tried like a general membership group. I tried various forms of different types of training that were a little different than what other people were offering, just to see like what's going to tangibly make the most difference. And there are just downsides to all of it. The mentoring one of the big issues was when we're talking about the first year of growth in as a service provider, a lot of it comes down to just like hitting the pavement on those pitches. And so there just at some point, there was no value in sitting there checking in with someone every week going, did you send your 20 pitches? No. Did you send your 20 pitches? No, you didn't. We'll do it next week. You know what I'm saying? Like, so just trying stuff like that. And then, so it kind of was just things kind of aligned where I felt like I had a really clear plan of what the needs in the market were from beginner through advanced writers, and how I could solve those things via a comprehensive course and a paid membership group. And then I found out my second kiddo was on the way. So I was like, well, shit, I got 9 months, before all my time is gone. So let me just see if I can do this. And so just gave it a shot, and it very much followed kind of the little, exponential curve graph, like very low income through the first 6 months. And then it started ramping up. My goal was to hit 10K a month in product sales by the 12th month. And I did like 16, and then I did 25 so far this August. I guess we're at the end of August now. I'm starting Facebook ads this month as well, heading into next month to see if we can scale it higher, but who knows what's going to happen. I might just lose all the money I made doing that, but we'll see.
Yeah, you got to set a pretty clear budget for those Facebook ads, but I mean, you should be pretty good at it if you're a copywriter, right? I mean, but I guess Facebook ads are a black hole even to copywriters.
Well, I'll be the first to say, like, copywriting is only, in my opinion, like 15% of the result. Product market fit and getting in front of the right people are the bulk of the thing, the bulk of the driver for sales. So, I mean, people at this stage have been getting a lot of ads for people trying to sell freelance writing training. So whether or not I can come in there and kind of highlight myself within that noise remains to be seen, but, we're giving it a shot.
Well, if anyone searches the term how to make money copywriting, like me, they'll find you. So that's good. And then it's just like converting on your own site. That was another interesting idea you're sharing about how copywriting is really only 15%, because I was listening to your episode today. I think it came out a few weeks ago about how, all these people are coming out here talking about, and this even applies to yourself, you didn't contextualize it. Everyone's out here bragging about their 100K launches. And really, it's just not that impressive if you already have 100,000 people on your email list and you convert 10 of them for your $1,000 product. It's like, wow, I'm so impressed. It's like, is it that you're a copywriting genius, or that you had, if you're selling something people want and they bought it? Like, it's not genius marketing. You just happen to put the right thing in front of the right people.
Exactly. And listen, I'll be the first one to say, if you write a 100K launch, leverage that shit, brag about it all you want. Like, use every scrap to push your own brand. But for everyone else who's looking at that going, oh, how can I get the skills to emulate that? I'll never reach that level. It's really not about the writing. Like, at the end of the day, if you're being clear, like, you can definitely sabotage a good product market fit by not being clear and not, communicating that it is a good product market fit. But if you're just being clear with the offer, people either want it or they don't. And there's like, maybe, it's kind of like heading into this election. Most people already know who they're going to vote for. There's a small margin of people who might be on the fence. That small margin represents what you can do with copywriting. Like, it's kind of, it kind of comes down to that.
Yeah. One of the other big topics in this podcast that I like to really get into, because, I'm interested in real estate, is real estate. And one of the things that you sent to us kind of in like your little bullet points about, what makes you, you, are that you passed up a big real estate investment to buy a recipe blog. Could you tell us a little bit about that? And why you decided to forego the real estate investment?
So first of all, it was not a big real estate investment. It was just a real estate investment.
It was an expensive recipe blog, I guess.
Yeah. I was looking at like a home in, I don't even remember the town in Oklahoma. That was like, I think it was like a $60,000 home that brought in like $550 a month in rent. And I was like, so I was looking at that and I was like, I could buy that, just kind of, hold the equity value, keep some rental payments, the typical why you do a real estate investment. And at the same time, I'd kind of been keeping my eyes open on some of the sites where they sell blogs. The one I ended up purchasing off of was Empire Flippers. And so I'd kind of just been looking, I put my deposit in so I could see the behind the scenes stats, just looking for something that I thought would be a good fit for me. And then I see this recipe blog, which was not otherwise a good fit for me, but it had been making like $1,500 to $2,000 a month in ad revenue for 3 years straight with almost no additional content, just on autopilot for that same $60,000 price. So I was looking at that and I was like, I could get in there and potentially scale that up to double that, probably pretty easy if I put some work into it. And if not, I'm making 3 times the rent payment, for no work essentially. And so I was like, well, shoot, like I'm going to take the three buy revenue thing. So I bought that, and I literally haven't touched it since I bought it. And it's just been knocking out 15 to 2,000 ad revenue every single month on autopilot. So it's just like, and I'm in talks with someone to merge it with their more social media focused food brand. And like literally the moment we conclude the merger, we're probably going to be having 8 to 10K per month in sponsorships coming through, because most of the people who want to do sponsorships with her are looking for a big blog draw as well for a lot of, organic traffic, which the blog I bought's bringing in, over 100,000 visitors a month. So it's just like, when we combine those two things, it'll be a big revenue jump. But yeah, it's just kind of one of those things where it's like the real estate just had literally no upside past, the $500 a month. So I was like, shoot, like, if I'm gonna, at that point, it's like I'm still under 30 years old, might as well take some risks here.
Sounds like the blog had a really good cap rate to me. That's a pretty big return for not having to do anything, for sure.
Totally. And blogs in general, they're just much more volatile, which is why they're a little bit riskier. But to me, the blog had such an extensive history that it was just like, I felt like it was as close as you could get to more of that real estate income profile that was unlikely to crash, because typically, 9 out of 10 blogs, you don't touch them for 3 years and they're done. Like they're literally worthless, so just kind of one of those unique things I hopped on. And, I'm still about 2 years out from breaking even on that investment. So anything could happen. It could still blow up in my face, but so far it's, so far so good.
Speaking of blogs, you give a lot of free content on your website, which is what led me ultimately to spend so much time on it before purchasing anything or anything like that. What's the strategy behind so much free content up front? Because I mean, it's like you gave the whole lesson for one of the modules of your courses, like longer than the scroll bar, like shrunk because I'm going to have to set time aside to read that because it's so much content. Yeah. Like looks good, but what's the reasoning there?
Yeah. So, I mean, part of it is that most of the blogs that I've read and most of the people who I've purchased from over the years, because I've spent over $30,000 on courses, coaching, and consulting, over the last 8 years. And, most of the people I bought from did the same thing. They gave me a lot of really good value up front for free, to where it was like, okay, I want to go deeper on this specific objective that they're helping with. So it made sense to pay them for the more in-depth and more streamlined take on it. Because at the end of the day, blog posts and education are not aligned in their goals. When I create a blog post, like my, complete guide to website copywriting, that's 10,000 words, probably the longest one on there. My goal for that blog post is not to give a freelance writer the most succinct education that they can have on how to provide website copy as a service. My goal is to provide the best possible answer to the query of website copywriting on Google. So I'm looking for any person who is typing that in Google. I want to provide an answer that incorporates what they're looking for, so I can rank and be the #1 result for that, which I am. And so that's my goal there. And when we talk about even the website copywriting lesson in my course, it's actually less content because a lot of that content is counterproductive to someone who's trying to learn. And that's kind of a big issue too these days when we talk about online education. A lot of the people who make courses, they don't really have a clear understanding of trying to get someone from A to B. They're more just trying to sell a course, And so what they do is they take some core content and then they just try to throw every possible thing they can think of into the mix and provide this really large horizontal view that is impressive to read. When you look at it, you think, oh, wow, I'm getting so much value. Thank you. You're great. I'm not going to ask for a refund. When in reality, 75% of that stuff is often working against you. And that's super true in the freelance writing kind of space. A lot of the advice that's given to freelancers is designed to either tell them what they want or make the person giving it look impressive, even while it's actively sabotaging their career. For example, charge what you're worth, increase your rates, don't take on shitty clients. That's directly against the advice I said at the beginning of this show, where I'm talking about, I want you taking as much work as you can through that first year. Anyone who will flash you a 20, because every single day, I have people emailing me who are in their 3rd and 4th year of copywriting and have been following all these other gurus. And they're in this feast, this stereotypical feast and famine cycle because they haven't been increasing the demand for their work. They haven't been increasing their experience. They're working on 1 gig every 2 months. That's a high paying gig, but they're making less than people charging way less and working on way more projects. And so those people are kind of going to go like this, while the people who are following my advice are going like this, and it takes maybe a year or two for them to break even with the people who are going like this. But from there, it's all gravy from there, while those other people are going to cycle for the next 5 years. And that's kind of what I do, in my blog content, in my SEO driven content. The goal is very simply to provide value while grabbing these rankings. And so if it's a piece of content, if it's a topic that's not going to give me SEO value, I'm probably not going to spend a lot of time going into it. And so there's a lot of stuff like that that's in the course. That's the really helpful stuff. But it's so that's kind of those are kind of the interplays there. I want to rank for as much stuff as I can. And at the end of the day too, I'm not really worried about overgiving content to people because, one, I don't need everyone who comes to my site, even everyone who benefits from my brand, to pay me. If there's hundreds of people coming through and changing their lives off of my free content without me making $1, I'm great with that. That's fine. I'm still going to make enough money from the people who do want to pay and who do want the more direct guidance to pay my bills. And I'm not over here trying to milk every dollar I can get. I'm just trying to create good shit and, make some money. So
I love that answer. And I think I left a note to Kyle, I was fascinated by the whole explanation there, just on our little Word doc where we worked through the questions. I was like, this guy knows his stuff. I love it. I really like the level of detail and the thought process behind all the decisions along the way and the strategy, as well as the ethics. But you obviously really know what you're doing. But I think something that's really interesting that you mentioned earlier is that you've assembled your own group of other high-performing writers. You've kind of divided your following or the people learning from you into people who are at the beginner phase, and then a kind of more active discussion committee with some other people that are also high-performing. What are some things you've learned from assembling that group and learning from other people doing well?
Yeah, so one of the big reasons I chose to build the group that way is because I had a sort of a low-key student, someone who was connected to my brand, who I'd spoken with and given some advice to, and it was kind of just loosely following my brand. They scaled their business up to $15K per month using mostly LinkedIn as their driver. LinkedIn was completely off my radar. So when I started seeing what they were doing through LinkedIn, it kind of started me on this journey of realizing, hey, there's multiple ways to do this. And SEO, which is kind of the way that I built my business, is not the right fit for everyone. And so if I want to help more people, I need to find as many different methods that are working as I can and present all those options to people, so people aren't sitting there, so people who are kind of going to have more of a square path aren't trying to force themselves into this, circular hole that I'm creating for them. And so that was kind of the idea with Right Minds. LinkedIn, that's that one. I don't just pass it on to my students. I follow through on it as well. So I've been more active on LinkedIn, and it's yielded a lot of benefits for my business, both in terms of building Right Minds, bringing in students, connecting with other writers, forming friendships with people. Tons of upside from that. That's a big one. And then, also it's just kind of the other idea behind the group was that once you've kind of developed the basics, once you kind of know how the career works and you're following through on the fundamentals, your growth tends to be more about kind of getting just like that one relevant piece of advice here and there over the years. It's not the big presentation. It's like the little bit of advice here. It's that one thing you learned from that one training here. When I doubled my income at one point within a 30-day period from this one comment in a course I took where they were talking about how to package your high ticket writing consulting services. And I just followed through on basically going from more of an a la carte view to a packaged view. And that literally doubled my income in 30 days. So just small stuff like that can just have drastic impacts, especially once you're further along. When you're in the beginning, small stuff doesn't really change anything. It's more about finding that flywheel system that you can grow with. But the further you get, the more really small stuff can have a huge impact. And so Right Minds is just kind of about making a place where everyone can be getting those small little pieces of advice. And so, sometimes you get the thing with LinkedIn saying, hey, this is a viable leads channel. I'm going to pursue this. It's real specific like that. Other times it's a little thing with the way you do an onboarding, the way you're doing your freelance onboarding. I see that a certain person in the group is doing it one way. I try that out. And then a few months later, I realize, oh, wow, my sales rate just went up by 20% or something like that. So kind of just stuff like that.
Yeah. I don't want to say that you make it sound easy, but I don't love to write. I don't consider myself great at it. Lewis, I think, is, and he's, on that path, and that's why he found you and why we're talking to you. But right now, it's looking like a pretty good career path. So why do people fail at what you do? Why do people get into it and then not meet this endless demand that's created?
The number one reason people fail is because they don't embrace that they're their own sales department. That's the number one thing. Literally every single business is two parts, sales and fulfillment. When you're a writer, if you're a decent writer, the fulfillment comes pretty easy, but you still have to hit that sales one. I'm on Twitter all the time where I see people complaining about someone in their group who closed a deal and is then asking the group for help with how they can fulfill the thing they just sold. And I'm like, Well, no shit. Sales is a whole different skill from actually being able to deliver whatever you sold. And so that's kind of the big thing, is that a lot of writers come in, they want to be good writers, they don't want to sell. They don't want to sell themselves. They don't want to do the prospecting to get the people to sell to in the first place. They're not willing to be consistent with their pitches, with getting out, putting themselves in front of people who might need work. At the end of the day, doing this is not hard. But it's the same way with like losing weight. Losing weight's not hard. You eat on a small deficit every single day. It's the every single day part that's hard. It's not the any individual day. Sending out 20 pitches is not hard. Sending out 20 pitches every week is hard because, as humans, we are not wired to be consistent. So that's really the big thing, is just lots of things that can come up to kind of derail your consistency. Some people fight through it. Some people don't. A lot of times, going back to that whole information, having too much information, how it can be counterproductive. A lot of people, they'll listen to me give my spiel about, getting your 20 pitches out per week. They'll nod along, they'll go do it. They'll go do it for a week or two. Maybe they don't land any clients right off the bat. And then at a certain point, it's like, okay, I hear about this new marketing tactic from this guru I follow, or someone talks about how they landed this client. I'm going to stop pitching now and go try that because that's new and exciting. And then there's enough info out there. There's enough tactics out there. You can do that unsuccessfully through 100 tactics. You can spend the next 2 years going through a new tactic every single week with no results. And it's just kind of like this. There's always a carrot that's ready to distract you from the fundamentals. And it's just very difficult, for most people, really everyone, I think, to, ignore the carrots and be consistent on the fundamentals and just embrace the hard part of growth. And so I think at the end of the day, that's kind of what, limits people. And then there's also just the luck factor of take two people who are, equally inconsistent. One of them lands a client in that 2-week period, just they get lucky on the statistics. They're going to be a lot more motivated to hit that third week than the person who doesn't, So it's kind of a combination of these factors. Some people kind of the cards roll in their favor, others don't. But I've seen people make every single mistake, have everything go against them, and they still just like brute force their way through to making it work, So that's where it's like if you're persistent enough, you can make this work almost without exception.
That reminds me of that last episode we put out was with this kid who did really well wholesaling real estate, which is another really popular thing people are trying to get into right now, because it's like you don't need to be a licensed agent. There's not all these gatekeepers. Just go out and do it. And
my biggest client right now does training on wholesaling, so totally.
That's pretty funny. Then maybe I shouldn't give this next piece of advice, but this kid goes, all these people reach out to me on Instagram in the DMs because they hear about all this money I made wholesaling. My answer is I'm not going to answer any of your questions until you go knock on 100 doors. So it's kind of the same thing. It's like, if you're willing to go out and make 20 sales pitches a week, and then every single week, things are going to work themselves out. Mastery of the fundamentals, which is super consistent with a lot of the other guests we've had on here. Maybe there's a pattern there.
Maybe every guest that we've ever had.
Maybe every single one, actually. Same idea, maybe packaged in a different way, but
yeah. There's people who are willing to tell you that consistency will get you where you're trying to go, and then there's people who are lying to you. It's really that simple.
I like that a lot. Yeah. Okay.
Exactly. I think we're going to transition out to the bonus rounds. Just not really as following of a flow.
Sure.
But just some fun questions to see what you think about some different things. So when you think of the word successful, who's the first person that comes to mind and why?
Probably Elon Musk, just because I just regardless of anything else, I have so much fucking respect for that guy. Like making, what was it, like 190 million off of his PayPal sale. Like the dude could have just bought an island, been making, couple million a year on interest alone. And he put all of it on the line for two businesses that have a chance of single-handedly making us a multi-planetary species. And he was successful on both of them. Like, goddamn, man.
He was sleeping on couches. He didn't have money for rent, and he made $180 million.
Like the absolute audacity to go do that is just mind-blowing. And I respect the hell out of it. and then you also kind of the tag team of he's ludicrously wealthy now through doing that. And he's accomplishing something that is meaningful for, humanity potentially. If we do survive as a species, looking back, this will almost be the bottleneck where he like single-handedly pushed us over the gap, potentially, which that's just like for someone to like have that big of a role in the course of history is mind-blowing as well,
Yeah,
So,
Lewis and I often like to talk about influencers and stuff, and we're like, yeah, but are they really going to be in the history books? Like Elon Musk is for sure going to be in the history books one way
yeah.
or another.
The thing I like to rag on in my space, completely hypocritically, is, the software as a service businesses. You got the best and the brightest out here wasting their lives on like a single-use tool that's capturing several billion in market share that nobody needs. If it was gone tomorrow, the second best tool in line would be virtually just as good. It's just there's these huge industries right now that are like money printing machines, but don't actually accomplish anything. And even the products they have, in my opinion, like might as well not exist. And, I'm right there, doing the copywriting for them. It's so, like I said, completely hypocritical. But I often think about that, like, how much of the most lucrative opportunities today are completely misaligned with stuff that actually, means anything, in the long term.
Yeah.
I got really philosophical for a second. I'm going to ask a lighter question. I think Kyle and I were going for the same question there, actually. I could feel it. But I was drinking a really janky decaf coffee with chocolate powder in it during the first 20 minutes or so of this call. But what's your preferred way to make your coffee?
So a friend got me into home espresso brewing like a year and a half ago. And I've basically been drinking espresso 2 to 3 times a day ever since. So I got I think it's like a $3,000 setup between the machine and the grinder, because the grinders are kind of expensive, the good ones. And then, so I make my own espresso at home every day. And it's fun when you're hosting to be able to give people like, barista quality coffee, like at your own house. It's kind of fun. So.
Okay, next question here. What tips can you share for drawing emotions out of people through your writing?
The first and most important thing is understanding, what they care about and framing what you're saying in that context. And honestly, that's probably one of the biggest reasons that business owners struggle so much to write copy, is because they care so much about their business and their offer, their technique, all the things that they've had to invest in to bring this product to the table. And it is impossible for them to step outside of that and not just talk about what they want to talk about relative to the customer. Whereas the customer a lot of times doesn't really, doesn't give a shit about how it's made. They just want to know what it can do for them. And so, when you're writing copy, you want to be focused on, what are they wanting to accomplish with this thing that you're offering, and, and how can you frame it in those terms. The other thing is, giving a story of a personal story or a client story, kind of talking about a scenario that people can relate to. Like one thing I like to talk about sometimes is like, there were times before I really got into copywriting where, I was checking my bank account before buying dinner. Like if I wanted to add a drink, I need to like pull up my bank account to see if I could afford to get a drink. And that's a very relatable scenario to a lot of people who I'm speaking to about getting into copywriting. So I'm presenting a story that they can relate to, and then transitioning it into, an outcome that they want, that they can't relate to. And so kind of juxtaposing some things people can relate to something people want to relate to. And also just, creating vision for how things can be what they want them to be. And also to communicating things to people that they can agree with and get behind, is kind of this mantra of like, you want people nodding along 2 or 3 times within your first few sentences. Like if you can get people nodding along and engaged in what you're saying, it's like, it kind of gets them to buy in better, just stuff like that. It's less about, at the end of the day though, it's less about the technique and more about, are you presenting something that they actually want?
Yeah, well, that gives me a question here, because you've done a lot of that, maybe accidentally, maybe just the way you talk in this conversation, just sharing copywriting as a career in such a inspiring kind of way where I'm sure people that have listened up until this point are like, wow, that does seem possible. That does seem interesting for me. I could probably do that. So who would you advise that for, and who would you advise against kind of taking that path?
The copywriting path?
Yeah. Freelance copywriting. Who are like, what's a good situation where it makes sense to think about that seriously versus another situation where it's really, you should probably stick to other stuff?
So I would say just the baseline of how comfortable are you writing? You know, like if you had an idea you wanted to communicate to someone, but you couldn't speak it and you needed to write it down, like, would you feel like you're leaving a lot of your communication on the table by not being able to verbally say it? Or would you actually feel like you can do a better job of communicating it when you write? For a lot of people, that's a really easy question. You know, like it's just really easy to say, oh yeah, I'm pretty comfortable writing, or no, I'm not. That's like the first baseline. If you're in the yes, I'm comfortable with it, then I would say it just comes down to what your goals are. You know, if you're looking, because there's virtually no downside to learning copywriting as a skill, because it translates into almost anything else you want to do. And when you're first getting started, it's probably one of the quickest ways to make capital right up front, you know, and get that initial cash flow, which again is valuable to anything else you want to do. It's kind of the reason I chose accounting as my major. I was like, what's a major that would be virtually impossible to regret having? You know, like accounting, it's going to go into almost anything I want to do. Copywriting is kind of the same story. It's like literally anything you want to do, it's going to be an asset to you. So if you have something specific that you know you're passionate about doing that's not copywriting, you know, go take, you know, especially if you're young and you don't have a lot of bills to pay, go take a chance on the higher risk thing that you want to do. You know, but if you're in a scenario where you really need results on the sooner side, or you just don't know what you want to do and you're looking for something to invest your time into that's going to have no downside and you're never going to regret doing, then copywriting is a great fit for you.
Man.
You know, so.
You're so good at selling it. I love it. So what are your 5-year goals? What's next for you? You know, you're the number one spot on copywriting. Like, what else can you go after?
To be honest, that's a tough question, just because I'm kind of in like the 5th year of my previous 5-year goals. So I'm kind of still developing what that next. I just turned 30. I just had my second kid, so it's kind of this new phase of life that I'm still trying to figure out what's next. I will say right now, you know, I'm looking to sink like $20K a month plus in ad spend to see if I can scale things up into more, maybe closer to that 7-figure level. That was never something I had wanted to do originally. My goal was always make $150K a year. Then once I hit that, I was like, okay, how can I make $150K a year working less, you know, or setting up something that's more recurring. But I don't know. Yeah, once I hit the back end of this last 5 years, it was like, well, you know, I got a good amount in savings to where I can pretty much fuck up a bunch over the next 5 years and still be good to go into retirement. So might as well roll the dice, take a shot at scaling up to a new level that I'm not familiar with and see if I can make an even bigger impact. And if I don't, I don't. And so that's kind of probably that's the goal for the next 5 years. See if I can take a business up to more of that 7-figure level. And, you know, probably if you talk to me 12 months from now, I'll have a whole different view of that depending on how these Facebook ads go. But we'll see, we'll see.
We'll check back in then. Cool.
Yeah.
No, that's great. I'm really glad you came on here with us. This was super valuable to me personally, just to be able to ask you these questions one-on-one, think about it, and be able to follow my curiosities with you. And I'm sure everyone else got a lot out of it too, because you explain things so clearly, and that's kind of what you're expressing is an important skill in copywriting is concise communication and clarity. So I really enjoyed this conversation a lot and want to thank you for coming on. Where can people go if they want to get some more resources on this? What's the start here button for your brand?
Yeah, so I mean, you can go to my website, which is jacobmcmillen.com, or you can just Google copywriter. First result, hit them with the flex. Yeah, so I mean, that's pretty much where it starts. I got my free crash course, which is a pretty in-depth, over deliver, as we talked about earlier. So you can start there, and then also, if you prefer to just kind of get 10-minute audio clips, obviously I have the Right Bites podcast that you can sign up for as well. I'm starting to try to do some more videos, but who knows if we'll actually stay consistent with that. But yeah, that's about it. I appreciate you guys having me. It's fun chatting.
Totally. Well, I think you're the first guest we've had whose call to action is to search a one-word phrase on Google with the promise that you'll find him. So that's pretty good.
Oh, there it is.
Okay, cool.
It's a good party trick.
Wow. Talk about somebody who knows how to persuasively speak. I mean, right now, I want to take the money out of my pocket and put it in his pocket. Like, talk about a copy talker. You know what I mean, Lewis?
That's I don't know if that's going to catch on, copy talker, but he is a persuasive speaker, and he does a very good job making you think copywriting's both attractive, doable, lucrative, and maybe it is. We'll see. But I enjoyed that conversation. I found it really rewarding. It's so cool to be lost in an internet search, find someone interesting, reach out to them, and be able to have a conversation and learn more about them and be able to ask them some questions and share that with whoever's listening. So if you are listening, thank you so much for being here. We appreciate you. If you want to keep up with us, best way for you to do so, follow us on social media at Lewis Kyle Show or something similar on most major platforms. And if you want to help us out, you can do so by either sharing this interview or another one with a friend, or going on iTunes and leaving a rating and or review to help grow the show and let other people know that it's good or bad or whatever you think of it. Anyway, that wraps up this week's conversation. We'll see you in a week with the next one. Thanks for listening. See ya.